to see all the new faces. I said to someone the other day where the MEL team is almost back to full strength, which is a hockey term. You know, I live in Minnesota, so I have to use my hockey terms. I think we've had 8 new people join just over the last 2 months. So it's great, and welcome everyone. I'm not going to try to introduce everyone since we have a lot of content to cover. But also welcome to the MEL Community of Practice. So this is a Bixal-wide presentation on different topics within MEL. So if there's things that anyone is interested in, please do send topics our way. We try to do things that are relevant or timely, which AI is one of those things. And we have a resident expert. Val has done a lot of work on AI for MEL and I think has some great ideas. So we asked him to cover this topic to get us started and to try to think about how we can use this tool a little better for our work. So thank you, Val, for presenting. I'm going to turn it over to you. Maybe you could just do a brief introduction of yourself since this is a larger group, and then I will turn it over to you for the presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Annie. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm Val, Valentine, and I'm the Chief of Party for the USAID Burma MELSA project, which is a MEL platform. We are based in different countries, and I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia, but our principal mission of work is in Myanmar, or as USAID calls it, Burma. So I'm, as Annie mentioned, I have kind of an interdisciplinary skill set. I started off as to be specific in today's world, is penetration tester. That sounds odd, I know. It's basically somebody who tests vulnerabilities of systems. So I was in IT for 1.5 years before I switched over to international development. That was around 20 years ago. And since then, I've been in the field of international development, starting off as a researcher. And then, at least for the past 12 years or so, I'm mostly in MEL with USAID, DFID, and FCDO, and multiple donors, and so on and so forth. Next week, I will complete 2 years with Bixal in this role, and I'm very happy to be being part of this group. I know some of you, I mean, I know most of you, but those of you I don't know, hello. And hopefully I'll keep this presentation interesting for you. Because as I say in the title, it's artificial intelligence for MEL, but also MEL for AI. And I want to especially emphasize the need for MEL professionals to understand AI and utilize it. Part of my role in not just as Chief of Party here, but in general in my engagements and thought leadership in this space is really to get folks in international development, especially in MEL, get interested in emerging technologies on AI, blockchain, and so on and so forth, because that is the need of the hour. So I'm sure about the technology itself. We have a lot of colleagues in IT, in Bixal. You can walk into their office and understand more. So I will briefly touch on what is AI and the principles behind it. But I want to emphasize, as evaluators, because this is a MEL community of practice, what are some of the frameworks and approaches that we could take in guiding AI to be reaching its true potential, minus the pitfalls that many people have been raising that it has. So these are the learning objectives, and just a brief understanding of what is AI and some examples of how it's used in international development, and specifically in AI for MEL, and ethical consideration, especially MEL's roles or our roles, and to be truly catalyst in this emerging trends of utilizing AI. To give a brief timeline of AI or artificial intelligence, the term itself was coined in 1956 in a conference, but the use of machines to automate things goes as further down to the 14th century when Blaise Pascal invented a counting machine or a system that does automatic work. And you can see a robot down there in the slide, where a robot in New York was shown how it can blow the balloon by itself by a system developed. And so since that time till now, AI has come through a long journey. And some people do argue that the term artificial intelligence itself is a misnomer, because AI is neither artificial nor it is intelligent, because AI requires a lot of natural resources and precious stones and computing power that uses a lot of natural resources. In fact, sometimes even exploits natural resources to function. And it's not intelligent as the way human beings think. We don't draw patterns from statistical data, but we think and explore and explain and feel and emote. But the AI is just a statistical algorithm. So calling it an AI is just a thing that Alan Turing and his buddies made popular, and it retains. But nevertheless, it is what we have, and that's what we continue to use. Just to introduce you, you may have heard AI, machine learning, deep learning, all this everywhere in the newspaper. You open your television or something, or even in your Twitter feeds or X feeds, it's called now. So you feel all that. So what it is, and again, you may have known what it is. Just to recap, artificial intelligence is the larger science where you have these systems that are useful in understanding different types of smart systems and machines that carry out tasks that are normally used only by human beings or human intelligence. Machine learning is a subset of that, where we create algorithms or statistical codes that can learn from data and make decisions based on these observed patterns. But machine learning requires human interventions almost nearly every time, because if you want to troubleshoot something or if you want to update an algorithm, you still need a human to intervene. Deep learning, which is another subset of AI, which is one step further, is where you teach machines to teach itself or fix itself. Like, for instance, if you have smartphones, I'm sure all of us have, you have this thing called Alexa. If you have Amazon, or if you have Android phone, you have this thing called Bixby. And then if you have a fake phone like iPhone, you could have something called Siri. So in that one, it talks to you and understands your patterns, and it's unique to you. Like sometimes Siri will know who's your girlfriend or who's your mother, and this is not unique. This is unique to you. So it's learning by itself by interacting with you on a on a daily basis. So that is the deep learning part, that the systems that are there. And again, this is just a general introduction. Some of these slides, it looks like it's 46 and 51 slides, but I'm not going to walk through all of this. I've just compiled this so you can go and look at it. So AI is the broader science of technological domain, and under that is machine learning, which is where most of our work is now, predicting, evaluating, or developing models and so on. And deep learning is where you have these systems, intelligent systems that understand you with minimal intervention from you, except your interactions, and it learns and fixes itself, like Siri and Alexa and so on. So going further, again, with all the advanced systems, even at the deep learning level and or at the machine learning level, the AI that we have now, even this most sophisticated one, is called a weak AI because they have narrow capabilities. Like if you have an AI system in your Tesla car which drives, it's not going to cook your meal. Or if you have AI that senses your chlorophyll level in your garden, it's not going to turn on your air conditioning or smart systems in your phone. So they only do one task at a time, as opposed to human beings, we can multitask. At least those of us who are willing to do that. But artificial general intelligence is what you see in movies like Terminator, is able to walk and talk like human beings and have emotions, and gets self-conscious and starts to perform its actions. But that is really a movie thing. In reality, AI, even the advanced form, has not reached that stage yet. And so, sorry, something's wrong with yeah, we have not reached that stage yet, but probably we will go to that stage in a near possible future. I mean, just 10 years ago, or at least even when I was doing bachelor's in 90s, we didn't even have a mobile phone, and now we have a mobile phone, or we had a heavy phone which was like used as a weighing stone or something. But now phones are so slim, and that's multiple things. So AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is going to be not really a distant future, but can happen soon. And what people are anticipating, like folks like Elon Musk or those in controlling companies like that, are having to have an artificial super intelligence or strong AI, which is supposed to have transcendent capability. Transcendence is basically where you're able to download your mind into a computer and then live forever, kind of a things, where you become a sentient being, even if your physical force is gone or your physical attribution is gone. It's almost in a way spiritual, Because if you've ever been to India, or you probably or do yoga in the US, you do namaste, or it actually comes from two words, nama and hate, which means I salute the universe in you. But when you die, the universe in you, I mean, you die physically and become part of the universe. So the artificial super intelligence, in a way, it's kind of spiritual in that sense. For those of you who are yoga enthusiasts, that you're aiming towards being immortal, at least your mind, even if your physical body is there. Maybe some Elon Musk of the future will find a way to download you back again with your physical form as well. But again, is it possible or not? We don't know yet. But look at 100 years of progress in technology, and maybe the next 100 years we may not be around, or we may be around as files in a computer. So that is the future of artificial intelligence, at least anticipated. So what's all this buzz about generative API? Some of you may have downloaded this ChatGPT and other things that go with it. There's even a web page or something that's called, there's an AI for that. For everything, there is an AI. So generative AI is simply a artificial intelligence system which uses machine learning and also algorithms to generate visual or even a thematic representation of whatever you want it to do by learning patterns. Like you want to imagine a historical figure in a hip hop costume, like Napoleon in Brooklyn or something like that. It is able to visualize, and it's a fun thing to do. And that is what is quite popular these days with Gen Z or millennials and so on and so forth. But it also has actual uses beyond the fun stuff of imagining Jesus singing hip hop or something like that, but also in terms of a project level where you can predict climate events and get a visual faster from multiple data points, or generate strategic plans for programs, develop a theory of change, code books and training data, project evaluation, analysis, and detection on a much more visually appealing and easy to connect way. I mean, even if you go to a community that probably may not know how to read and write, and if you visualize them, they are able to better understand and comprehend and even participate better. And even at individual level, if you're a MEL specialist in a place and you want to use generative AI to understand, program updates or review the summaries of research in a way of generating fact sheets instantly and organizing notes, there's endless possibilities from generative AI. Let's look at briefly some examples of AI, how AI has been used now in different. I've tried to keep mostly USAID examples, but many of them are not USAID. But this one is Grio, which is a startup supported by USAID. I don't know if you know. I don't think if it's still there. USAID used to have the DIV, or Development Innovations Ventures or something. It's a fund that they used to give for startups, which was hugely popular. And Grio was supported by that, one of the earliest AI systems that USAID supported. So it's in the city of, I think it's pronounced Oaxaca, and where they use predict natural disasters and so on. You can say that whether or not this is not possible without AI, it is. It's just that AI makes it much more faster and able to look at multiple data points at a single point. And then in Nepal, for instance, supplementing existing data using mobile phone location and using big data with monitoring and evaluation data from IPs, you're able to combine and predict natural disasters. And sometimes in these kind of scenarios, minutes and hours and seconds matter in improving or in doing proactive steps to prevent earthquakes. I'm really going to brush through these slides because I want most of my focus to be on how evaluation can help build AI, because I'm sure what AI can do, you've read a lot if you're interested in these kind of things. This is Plantix mobile app used by the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, where over 240 plant diseases are discovered immediately by farmers with the simple use of an app which uses AI comparison to run across. CGI works in 20 agroecological zones, and it's connected to all the zones to see whether or not this plant disease can be detected and solved immediately, and the information immediately goes to the farmer because it predicts how the plant will turn out before the harvest or even before the planting season happens, based on comparison of past seasons. Market segmentation, again, in Destachem is a fintech firm where it pre-approves loans for populations that are no longer are generally not eligible to receive loans according to a traditional banking system by looking at their spending patterns, the jobs they have, or the ability to pay for things on a daily level. So it kind of includes people who are probably not part of the formal credit system where you need a collateral and so on. But AI in this case made it possible for them to be inclusive. Customer citizen service chatbots, I'm sure all of you have interacted. Again, they're not the best sometimes, but depending on what service you use, in some cases that could be the safest one. Like for instance, in Burma, if you're interacting with pro-democracy forces and you don't want to directly involve with someone, chatbot is a nice way to share information on information on democracy and how to organize and defend your democratic values and so on. So I've compiled again list of areas. Please have a look at this slide when Christine shares with you on health and agriculture, how it's used for market segmentation, predicting crop yields, detecting tax evasion, and so on. So in many ways, these algorithms are able to do multitude of tasks that we normally do manually or in limited scope with simple statistics into a much more advanced computing power because of AI. Coming to the topic of AI in MEL, obviously, because a lot of this involves data and data points, not just quantitative, but also qualitative, this can be used in a series of a range of applications within MEL for data collection, cleaning, validation, and processing. Of course, you have to design the algorithms and guide the algorithms in such a way that issues that we want to do are dealt with correctly. I will, in the later part of my presentation, I'll talk about how do we do that. And again, AI can be used to identify and rectify data entry errors. Now we're doing some third-party monitoring in Burma, really places where we cannot reach. In some cases, if we design an AI system, it is able to automate some of these processes without putting human beings at risk in these locations. And also MEL projects can be automatically tracked to see whether milestones were achieved. The like escrow agreements, when you combine AI with the blockchain system, for instance, at one point USAID was very keen on testing those things for even awards like BAA or other awards where a worthiness of worthiness is probably not the word, but the right person for that job in terms of contracting is done by AI based on their CPARs, based on their past experience. And then it gives at least an initial list of a short list or long list of potential IPs who can be awarded a contract. And then the blockchain is supposed to automate and track whether or not they deliver on time, thereby releasing the yearly contractual obligation amount to that particular IP. Fully automatized. It's not yet being tested, but this is a potential for how a project objective can be tracked by donors or even by us when we have subcontractors using AI to see the project progress, and also even selecting subcontractors using the patterns of how they've delivered on the past or any challenges that they have had, and so on and so forth. It can be as small as even selecting interview candidates, like we saw in the early example of banking systems, when you're able to use people's overall spending behavior, not just having a large collateral in order to be eligible for a loan. So you look at skill sets of people, skill sets of organizations, and draw patterns and conclusions. At the moment, I know at least these three areas are being used in MEL. One is the natural language processing. I'm sure you've gone to AEA or MELTech and other events. They must have presented how they used text vectorization, NLSP transform text into a machine understandable format. Those of you who may have used softwares like Atlas TI, we have to code. Like I did the RAP report for 2021 for World Bank, which is the results and performance of all of World Bank's interventions, which is an annual report produced by the bank's independent evaluation group. And they use large amounts of qualitative data, and manually you code them, assign them a theme, and then you publish quantifiable results from a thematic perception of all of these ICRRs or ICRRs are basically monitoring reports the World Bank collects for every single grant or technical agreement that it produces. But an AI can using NLP, no need to code them one by one. It generates these themes based on the algorithm you set, and kind of use generative AI to write its own report. Again, it's not yet happening, but these are opportunities for NLP to perform. But NLP in text vectorization are being used by UNDP, UNICEF, and even the World Bank in certain sectors to use their qualitative information into machine readable format, enabling themes and patterns and visualize them. Facial recognition and attendance tracking in one of the projects in Indonesia called Project IAM, which works with refugees. AI is used to facially recognize someone who is in distress. Most of them are refugees from Afghanistan, and they come to these learning centers extremely distressed, and there's a high rate of suicide among them because they're around 18 to 24-year-olds and in the prime of their youth and productivity, but they're stuck here in a country like Indonesia where they're on transit and their fate on which country will receive them is unknown. So they're stuck on and day on and again. So when they come into the centers, the AI software detects their distress level and assigns counselors to them because they rarely open up. Again, there are data security, privacy issues with that. So there's a lot of consent things that goes with it. But facial recognition and attendance tracking is one way AI can be used in, observing people in a setting which is conflict or which is a distressing setting where you can go and intervene from a humanitarian perspective. Object identification have, again, practical applications in tracking attendance at different levels or participation in workshops, or even when you set up, let's say, toilets in a community or schools, you're able to track them from satellites and photo analysis to see whether or not buildings have really come up. If you worked in some countries, you will see a IP sending you reports saying 20 toilets have been built, 5 classrooms have been built, and you may not be able to physically go. Let's say you work in Somalia, but in using photo analysis of third-party monitors, you can gather and say, okay, this is a legitimate report and so on and so forth. So that's one of the ways AIs can be used. But what is not yet explored, but actually could be of use for MEL, is using digital twins. In case you've not heard of it, please Google it today. Digital twins is a physical representation, virtual representation of a physical thing. It could be a person, it could be a plane, it could be a field, it could be a farm. So if you go to the field and you do participatory analysis in the field, this takes it to another level. At least back in the days when I used to do research, we used to do in a village what is known as life history map of a village, or crosswalk or village walk, where you map assets and ask people to draw a social map of their village, where how people perceive. So especially if you work in India, you will see different caste people perceive their village in a different way as their power centers or their centers they cannot go. But if you're unable to do it in a setting as people are watching, you can always do it in a 3D model with use of a digital twin. That is another area. And the second is virtual realities. Well, recently, we had a cybersecurity study done for Burma, and that started with a conversation we had in December with one of the IPs that they had just finished a cybersecurity training, but they were arrested at the border because they forgot to use the safety protocols of erasing documents relating to pro-democracy in their laptop. But if you do virtual reality training where you actually simulate being arrested in the field, then it actually retains in changing your behavior towards protecting yourself and your laptop and staying away from the military. So endless resources and Internet of Things, again, combining it with digital tools and virtual realities is also able to, sense, let's say you have an agriculture project or economic growth project, then you can use Internet of Things, which are basically sensors that you can combine with AI to automate and speed up the data processes. At any part of this time, this seems like you're already brain loaded, overloaded, just stop me and ask me for questions, because I know this thing can be quite daunting if you're not interested in the field, or even if you're hearing it for the first time. But actually, if you start looking at it, you will see, especially if you're an evaluator interested in critical thinking, these are really great opportunities that we have. The challenges to that is what I'm going to talk about next, the ethical aspects of AI. Any questions so far, or can I continue to go on? That was the tech part and the AI and MEL part, but any questions so far, or can I go on?
Please go on, Val. And people, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll also have time for Q&A at the end. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. So with all the fancy technology and the possibilities, there's also challenges that we need to consider. The main ethical concerns of AI always revolves around fairness, inclusion, transparency, responsibility, accountability, limitations of data, and privacy and security. In some cases, in some countries, even infrastructure of deploying some of these resources. This is an actual news article I found where a MIT grad asks AI to make her photo more professional. but then it turned into a white woman because somebody who coded the algorithm actually believes only a white woman with blue eyes is professional and everybody else is not. So it's not that the AI system is bad. It's the people who define are biased. I mean, people who design these systems often are maybe insular in their thinking. So unfortunately, machines will only do what you ask them to do. So that's why we need evaluators to guide these systems. And that's what the next part of my discussion is about. And again, as I said, AI can be biased in the system level. Systems inherently lack transparency and are not self-explanatory. So it means who is ultimately responsible for AI system is a challenge. Few years ago, there was a movie by this dude called William Smith or something, Will Smith, and it's called Robot or I Robot something. I don't remember the name of the movie, but there's a scene in the movie. Throughout the movie, this character from this person who Will Smith plays is upset about anything to do with AI. Is because in this show it later why because when he and a child 7-year-old child are in an accident and they drown in a car under the water, the robot the AI system, I mean they live in a futuristic world where AI is yeah, thank you, I robot, I think. So the AI system jumps in and calculates both of them and sees that this dude has 45% chance of survival, but the child only has 18% chance of survival compared to the two. So mathematically, it calculates the higher person and rescues him while lets the child drown. So who is responsible for decisions like that? A human being wouldn't care if there was 1% chance they would save the child. But an AI, even though it's just a movie, it's a profound truth that the machines, that's what I talked about. There is no intelligence to them. They just follow patterns and objective view. And sometimes objectivity isn't the best things, especially even as we are a MEL community where we are supposed to be objective. Sometimes, subjective interpretation is the correct one. And so these are accountability and perceived objectivity concerns remain. And how can we really work around it is why we constantly need folks like us to guide these systems. And again, a lot of these frameworks are pretty boring. If you look at it, they will have the responsibility concern. If you look at guidelines from EU, guidelines from US government, they talk a lot about data privacy, data misuse, and so on. These are all seriously important factors, but implementing them rarely takes place. They just want a policy that sits there, but someone who's actually taking it forward and implementing it, I am yet to see at that level. Because most often these decisions or these technologies are guided by powerful companies and they build them. I mean, they have this check boxes from government and follow these protocols, but ultimately there's nobody who's telling them, no, in this context, this is dangerous. This is how you interpret it, and so on. Even in AI, we have this 10 digital principles, but yesterday I was talking about the human context, but in the notes I found that it was interpreted as human-centered design. Human-centered design automatically doesn't mean it's going to make things possible. I mean, human beings in themselves are quite diverse, and that is why I always say that research and evaluation people should be the ones guiding these technology processes or working in partnership with companies that develop AI systems. Again, these are some of the potential benefits and risks of AI when you can do optimizing job candidate matching. If you're doing an economic growth, like this LSP scholarship program we have, we did some study, but it can have structural biases in past hiring and lending practices. In education, AI technology to provide personalized feedback, neglecting to develop tools. These are also some of the risks. And in democracy, human rights abuses, circumventing censorship. But at the same time, risk could be AI is also used to spread algorithms. I mean, you see, at least it's alleged that Russia used AI systems to make a lot of false claims about Hillary Clinton during the last election cycle, and the impact of this is until today felt in so many ways in American politics, by creating deep fakes and making it sound real and kind of filling us with things, keeping us in a bubble that if you've ever worked in Africa and you've worked in multiple countries in Africa, and somebody asks you, how was it from East Africa to West Africa? And if you worked in that bubble, you will not be able to say, because you don't really go to Africa. You just live in this diplomatic bubble. And so that's what AI sometimes can create, especially with this messaging. I say this and I'm connected with only things that I check. If I'm Googling about, some ice cream that I like, all the messagings that I get in my phone will be about that ice cream. So I can't have another viewpoint. That's another potential risk of, having this information. Again, global health point of care diagnostics, but also it can contribute to fragmentation in health systems and so on. So please have a look at this, and I'm not going to go too detailed given that it's only a half an hour presentation and there's a lot to cover. But the unequal distribution of AI in development definitely will lead to disparities in benefits, because AI systems on one end and the global north are pretty well developed. Even though many of the AI systems are developed or outsourced by global south or in technology companies in the global south, they're not used in the global south. And so there's quite a bit of disparity even in this. And emerging technologies, as it is, are instead of bridging these gaps between the sophisticated or well-developed countries or so-called developing countries, it can also lead to a division or further amplification of existing problems. So this set of guidelines that we need for digital solutions and utilizing AI in international development is needed, and it has to be a much more comprehensive one. And the challenge to that is I will answer that when I read these questions. So people generally tend to treat not just AI, but also any technology as a magic wand. And as I said, there's a website called there's an AI for that. But as we all know, human development interventions are not always straightforward. So you can't just wave AI at a problem and think, oh, yeah, it's going to be great. I have an AI for this, so it's going to be solved. And it really needs, evaluators, especially qualitative folks, who understand, and the storytellers and the people who understand the nuances of what happens at the ground level, to be speaking to the tech folks. So some of what I'm about to say, usually when I present it in the global south or anywhere else from here, will sound like it's just Monday or Tuesday. But sometimes when I present it to an American audience, they think this is very left-leaning thought processes. I am not left-leaning or anything. I'm an objective researcher, and my presidency is not my cousin brother. So I have to put my disclaimer in terms of communism. But this concept of justice is something that keeps coming on in so many ways. You may have seen this picture when inequality is people are given distributed not equal opportunities, and equity is about giving the right sources and tools so that people get equitable access, and equality is the same. But justice is what is needed in systems when it comes to solving a social problem. And that is especially true when it's an emerging tech, where it's not really about giving things for one extra to another person because they are disadvantage, but it's really removing the root cause of the problem from society, and where does it issues come, and where do you look at it. So equity and equality can be intermediary step, but justice and inclusion of that problem by eradicating issues in the first place should be what development projects should be focusing on. And that is why justice is called for as an evaluation criteria. So beyond, this is a paper that some of you may know. Michael Kunpatton, you may not know me, but you certainly will know him. He and I have been collaborating for a long time, especially on his Blue Planet, Blue Marble evaluation, where he's talking about transformation as an evaluator, and also as evaluation methods. So we presented a paper on justice as an evaluation criteria in 2021 February, and it was published in a book chapter also. This was for a EES conference, but nevertheless, some of those factors that we presented can be a stepping stone to utilize or to be considered as a framework, especially in utilizing MEL for AI. We looked at what is AI. We looked at how AI is used in all these fancy and fantastic ways for MEL, but how can actually MEL as a evaluation, as a field, can contribute to a better development of AI processes. One of the key questions that we should consider in evaluating any technology, any emerging technology, it's AI or blockchain or any of those fancy ones that are coming, is the evaluators to start working with the teams that are developing and asking them, what is this new technology claiming to solve? Is the claim problem an actual problem? To existing approach not solved? This is what I talked about when you say, you have a hammer, everything will look like a nail. So you want to wave your integrity wand, or yeah, the AI is going to solve everything, but really need some things don't need AI. You really need oh, yes, Carla.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just actually, I meant to react
positively to the hammer and nail
Okay.
comment. So sorry.
No problem, no problem. So the idea is to ask whether it's, do you really need AI for this, and is it going to be effectively solving the problem, and are the costs involved worth it, and these are the start of kind of questions that we need to be asking. But unfortunately, we can't answer them, especially as MEL, in the pursuit of public good, donors will ask us to, do something new. Come on, innovate. But at the same time, we have to show that it's working. That is not possible because MEL, in general, MEL projects are contracts, and we function within contracts, and they are always about accountability. Even with the complexity of monitoring and DE and so on, we are only checking boxes, even in third-party monitoring, remote monitoring, on whether something is achieved. Even though we call it MEL, the learning concept still is, we are still in learning stages of how do we actually learn? How do we build agile systems like, when we do software, we do trial and test. So even MEL needs that kind of things. Developmental evaluation and CAMEL methods have made headways into this, but actually sometimes setting the evaluation criteria from the beginning could help some of it. As you can see, sometimes we can't judge something if it was done as expected, if it's AI, while we are in the midst of developing. AI is an emerging technology. How can I say it worked in a rural area in Somalia when the technology itself is evolving? And as an evaluator, if you're put in charge of a project to measure AI for MEL, how will you start? You can just say AI was given to 15 different people, but how did it translate? And that's why considering some of these systems are working. Sorry about the verbosity of this. Is basically the DAC criteria. And generally, we use DAC criteria for relevance, coherence, effectiveness, efficiency, and so on. And then the coherence was added in the latest iteration. And I'm not going to walk you through this. All of you know what this is. But the DAC criteria is still, the critics say it's just business as usual. They're not really sufficient to evaluate transformation or emerging technologies because of the structural inequalities, oppression, amplifier effects. It doesn't cater to them, or the challenges that technology poses for evaluators. I mean, maybe in Bixal we have an advantage because we have tech geeks that we can walk and ask about a technology, but in most development firms, they're exclusively development and they're not involved in the development. And OECD acknowledges this, even in their website, saying our criteria is not equipped to address transformative changes, innovation, and emerging technology. So what are the criteria that we can consider? So MQP, in his Blue Marble evaluation, proposes alternative criteria. This is part of the paper that we presented jointly, but this is his own thing, so I can't take credit for this. So instead of relevance, he's talking about transformational fidelity. Instead of effectiveness, he's talking about complex systems framing. All of this is not new, especially those of you who work in complexity of monitoring or third-party monitoring. I'm pretty sure you are aware of these principles. And then instead of impact, purely look at diversity. Equity is not about how many somebody got, but who were included in those projects. And instead of coherence, you look at adaptive sustainability. How does systems adapt and sustain? And finally, instead of sustainability, just from even though sustainability is not yet fully defined, but instead of just looking at whether a project is sustainable, you look at interconnectedness and what changes that comes with it. So these are again some of the proposed criteria that you can use in a framework while you, as a MEL practitioner, is trying to support the growth of MEL. And that is why the justice criteria which kind of summarizes some of these things that MQP or Michael Quinn-Patton is proposing comes. It's not new. Social justice criteria has been used in social work in several fields. It basically seeks to understand the interdependency of individuals in a community. Like I said, when you introduce a technology to a field where you do not know the context and the existing prejudices and biases, you stand the risk of amplifying the problem rather than solving it, because technologies have that capabilities. And if you see that AI image I showed where AI thinks a professional is someone who is, a white lady with blue eyes. And so that is just a simple example. There are multiple ways in which biases can actually amplify problems. And it's not new to development. Many organizations like the ones listed here are indeed using it. And justice criteria can be used in program goals to understand relationships and power, outcomes and development of theory of change, how results are reported, and what program impacts, and especially in matching how change occurs rather than just simply mapping outcomes as we would normally do. So justice as an evaluation learning tool for AI can be in the purpose of learning, where methods like DE is not really about, this is achieved, but what have we learned in the first 3 months of deployment of an AI tool? Who is the beneficiary? How is it changing structural relationships? How is it amplifying existing social inequalities? These should be the focus, and the focus should be on contribution rather than attribution. And then it gives power back to those people whom this technology is introduced to, the folks who are normally, beneficiary or recipient or something like that, actually become equal partners in the intervention and also in the evaluation process. So therefore, I'm not here to propose this as the next step to evolutionary things, but this is one of the premise that we can consider, is using justice as a factor. Justice, which is where the premise of that image was to benefit someone, you have to give an advantage to someone, or to reduce advantage to someone else, which is what positive attribution it does, but not necessarily, and it's not about equality alone. So if we want to harness emerging technology and improve lives of people, as we say in our projects with USAID or any other governments, the evaluation criteria should be rooted in action that solves for equality as a first step, but look at justice and inclusion in their frameworks when we design evaluation criteria. And part of this framework should be an understanding of this interconnectedness that Michael Quinn Patton is talking about in his Blue Marble evaluation, especially the oppressions which happens. One thing I always find the word user-centered design is, some people use technology and some people abuse. So it has to be abuser-centered also. I mean, how can a technology be abused? Also should be used as an evaluation. And how do they manifest in history? Why these things are biased? Slave patrol or SUS partners, all these are because of historical biases which have not gone away or not have been understood. In some cases, they are looking at erasing the history and saying, no, slavery was a good thing, or caste system was great, it came from God, and so on. They try to brainwash us into something else. So as evaluators and as development professionals, when we work on these systems and these technologies, it's an opportunity for us to use history when we create technology that generates future, to learn from the past biases, and so that it doesn't get replicated. And considerations when we use justice criteria for AI is we should insist on using the language of oppression rather than simply bias. And oppression is where systematically something is done. Bias is just sometimes you are just, unconsciously, we in the US, we sign saying she, her. In some countries, they won't understand why you're writing she, her. It's so obvious to them. But it's not obvious to them because they're bad people or biased people. It's just their culture is different. So that is bias. But oppression is where systematically something is wrong and you systematically keep some people poor because you believe they are lower. I put a US Constitution example here because sorry, I don't know if I'm on time, but I'll rush up quickly. In Lincoln movie, there is a nice scene, if you've seen the movie. Sorry about movie references. Don't think I'm always watching movies, but sometimes movies tell us powerful stories, and I'm a believer in storytelling. There is a person called Thaddeus Stephen, and he's been historically arguing that African Americans and white folks are equal in all senses. But in the case of the movie, to get the 13th Constitution passed, he will kind of agree that, okay, I don't actually believe Africans, Americans, and white folks are equal in reality, but in front of the law, even though he doesn't believe that. But just to get the law passed, he agrees to it. But in reality, sometimes we just do things because that's policy, not because we really believe in it. We don't necessarily believe, women should be included or there should be diversity, but we follow it because Bixal has a policy, or, US Constitution has a policy. But in developing technology, if we simply follow it because there's a policy, there's never going to be diversity. You have to really, really know that people are created equal and you really believe in diversity. And we can't be in development internationally and think that these are left-leaning thoughts or, Jesus principles or whatever. These are not. These are human principles. I mean, it's not so strange outside of the US at all, because it's just normal way of life in so many ways. Like I gave you a disclaimer, I don't have to explain so much if I was in US to a non-US audience. So we need to teach us how we teach tech folks in our colleagues in Bixal or anywhere, opposed to what we are teaching them. That's what I mentioned by user-centered design versus abuser-centered. If AI is benefiting some folks in Mexico to adapt inclusive, some people will use it to target them. The technology in Myanmar was used to target Rohingya during the crisis that a particular NGO was using to help them with food. And the same food aid technology was used to target them for assassinations and murders. And so that's why we are in the cusp of taking this profession of evaluation not just as a job, or is my title MEL specialist, blah, blah, but really be a catalyst in this process of emerging technology and move forward to ensuring these unequal power relationships that exist in technology, be it at the global south or global north, and even amongst ourselves, to really make a change. And we always talk about transparency. Come on, just because something we see is bad doesn't mean it will not happen. I mean, we see in the last 3 weeks in US politics, just people openly flouting rules. And just because something is transparent doesn't necessarily mean, things are smooth. We always say we are an open and transparent environment. Great, so what? Transparency will only get us far. It's not a panacea, because that is why we need to think out of the box and see what seems to be the principles of justice, and whether or not, I really like this cartoon with the African women carrying this. You can create a tech to say monitor the water points, but it's still not going to carry the water home. So transparency is basically the advantages of using tenets of justice that Thomas and Merton said in 2010 is reject the possibility of neutrality, creates a critical understanding of socio-political forces, aims to eliminate inequalities, and so on. So I'm not going to read through it. You can have a look at it. But essentially, if you want to use MEL for AI, and this is a great chance to be part of a leadership team, and especially in Bixal, we have this opportunity to create these products which are beyond any policy and frameworks. But those of us from Nepal to Burma to Libya and throughout the world, we are globally have this knowledge base internally to understand how systems work. And why is it so needed right now? Because we are in the right time to guide technology so that people don't say AI is bad. AI is not bad. It's just the people who create them are biased or oppressive in nature. And so technology is transforming our lives. USAID calls it doing development in a digital world. We are no longer doing ICT 4D or digital development. We are doing digital in a developed world, so we can guide technology and involve in emerging technologies. So hopefully this kind of discussions motivate you and us to work together with tech folks in our teams to build systems that is not just AI for MEL, but also for MEL for AI. I hope it was not information overload, but feel free to reach out anytime you're interested in this. And I know some of you know Kerry, and Kerry and I are writing a paper on this, specifically a book chapter. So if you like to write a blog or something for AEA and other things, feel free to reach out to me. In the midst of my busy schedules, I'll still be interested if these things are there. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Let's open up the floor for questions if people want to stick a hand up. Thank you so much, Val. The comments that are coming through are all saying this is fascinating. There's a question from Liz. For those of us who are new, can someone speak to what Bixal is doing or opportunities or upcoming use? Maybe Val, you have some insight into that? Or anyone else who would like to jump in on where we're going with AI here at Bixal?
I think
What I can
Erica,
say about the incubators, that ideas that is being floated around. I mean, we haven't started on AI, but we have started on cybersecurity, which is another important aspect. But I'm sure there's something on AI, but others can say. But I would say that the incubator ideas that is currently floated, maybe Annie can share more on that, is a great idea for you to produce. I mean, we always get caught in that RFP cycle, but as a company, we have so much resources where we can really create the market rather than follow the market is my take on that.
Erica, could you share some of the latest? I know
Yes.
Jeff's on the line too.
So just briefly in the technology practice area, we are just creating AI DE, so artificial intelligence and data engineering practice area, so we can use this as an incubator to explore. But in building this, and also partnering with different academics and learning from folks, as Val was speaking about, ethical considerations is very important. So in building this AIGE practice area as a technology incubator, we're also building a responsible AI council at Bixal. So if you are interested in any of that, also please include me and Val. I want to make friends with you. So you'll be hearing from me soon.
Terrific. We have a hand up. Meredith, did you have a question?
Yes, there we go. Yeah, Val, this is awesome. Thank you so much for this. I feel like I've learned a lot and still digesting. I don't think my mission has a strong appetite for this, so I do think it is creating the demand or trying to demonstrate the value rather than like they're never going to come to us and ask about this, right? So just curious if you can say a little bit more about approaches you have in terms of selling this, or even just like as an exploratory thing. Like I think the some of the chatter in the chat about how we can use this for more systematization across partners and across data reporting requirements. Like I have ideas about how we could use that, but I think I would need to convince them. And any tips that you've found about kind of making the use case to the donors would be great.
So far in Burma, we've used the university, USAID University is a learning clinic that we host as a MEL platform. So we've had a few training sessions on that when people have expressed their interest in utilizing it. For instance, from one of our studies, from one of our follow-ons from Tech for Good, USAID University lesson, the cybersecurity study came forward. But again, most of them, what missions do really depends on what Washington decides or what the foreign policy is. So unless the COR is interested or the program office director is interested, it's a bit hard sell. But that's why engaging them in DC or when you go to these AEA conferences and you see colleagues, that's a great opportunity to engage, and being part of this thought leadership in Multech can help, because ultimately they follow that structure of, you know, if Washington DC says and allocates funds, they will adopt. But what we've been doing at the mission level is really through learning clinics. And even in Indonesia, we used to have AI workshops and so on. In RDMA, we used to have this frontier learning series where we used AI use cases. It's a lot easier with UN systems for them to be adapted. I mean, our focus is largely USAID, and USAID has its own policies. But if you're looking at other donors like CEDA or FCDO and so on, they are pretty keen on using them. It's an easy sell with them because they see the value immediately. So yeah, learning clinics or awareness is one of the first steps on how this can translate into it. So. Yes, I see 3 hands up, 2 hands up. Yeah, Carla.
And Liz is first.
Hi, Liz.
Yeah, good morning. I would just say briefly too, it's not necessarily about pitching AI to your mission. It could be more about pitching the end product, right? So like the way I like to think about it is like, what could you do if you had an absolutely unlimited size of your team, right? And so sometimes it's hard for me to kind of imagine how we might use these technologies, because in a lot of cases our data sets are so small, but like kind of broadening that view of like, if I had 1 million interns who could just crank through this data over and over again, what could I accomplish, right? And so pitching the product is an easier conversation, I think, than saying like walking into a mission and being like, how can I use AI with you, sort of a thing, right? So kind of thinking that way could be interesting and lead to some really interesting work.
Am I next? Val, okay. I just wonder how many people on the call today would be interested in some primer training on different aspects of AI. How many of you would find that very useful? Because we've got Erica and Jeff on the line, and I know that they've been sharing lots of resources, et cetera, but I ask that so that we can get those trainings set up. Nicole says yes. Anybody else?
I think we saw a lot of thumbs up on that.
Okay. Did you hear that, Erica and Jeff? And it may be sharing some of the most foundational videos that we've encountered to sort of explain the basics and build on that. I find that I learn much more quickly about what can be done and about the different aspects of AI when you, of course, apply it to different case studies and cases. But I think the technology team, I'll speak for them, is super interested in collaborating with you all to find the best cases and support your work in the MEL space. And I'm super excited about that. So thank you, Val.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Val. We're seeing lots of yeses coming in the chat and thumbs going up on Erica's message. I am going to wrap us up for now because we are just about at the hour and I know people have other calls that they have to jump to at 10, but let's look at how we can continue this. This was so interesting and has so many applications for our MEL team. Thanks again, everyone. And we'll see you next month when we are talking about GIS and MEL.
Thank you, Val. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.